Microvellum scrap management feature allows us to reuse scrap offcut materials for future work orders. So if I create a work order with this group of cabinets, so let's say this is my first work order. So inside of the processing station, I have a number of options related to scrap. So I can commit my scrap to inventory, meaning that when I'm done this optimization, if I optimize it a few times, adjusting my settings, I might want to not commit it until I've created the final one. And so then I can, once I've created my final one that's going to the shop floor, I can say commit scrap to inventory to make it available for future use. I can manage my scrap inventory, so I can go in here, and if I have some scrap parts that I want to include, I can select what material it is and add those in to make them available. I can manage my storage locations. So here I can create multiple bins for my scrap, and so by doing that, when I print the labels, if I print labels on the shop floor, I can assign it to a specific bin, and then when I go back to create my next optimization, it'll tell me where to find that particular piece of scrap. On the nesting station, so in the processing station settings, I can go here and edit my processing stations, and one of the tabs here is scrap. So I can modify my scrap and say save scrap meeting the following requirements. So I can specify a minimum area or a minimum dimension. So we'll say how this works, and so I can specify what size of scrap to put in there, or if I want to match a specific predetermined size, that those would only go to scrap. And here I can say prompt to commit scrap locations during processing. If I don't have that checked, it's going to do it automatically. So that allows me to do that. And then here I can say use scrap from inventory. So I can say automatically consume scrap from inventory, and then I can adjust my scrap trims as well. So if I have a scrap piece and I want to trim additional material off on it because maybe it got damaged during handling when it was first created, and then I can put a trim on there again. And then I have the option to destroy offall, so I can turn small parts or small scrap items into dust as opposed to using them or leaving them as small blocks that might get sucked up in the dust collector. So here I can adjust a variety of different scrap destruction and scrap saving options. So once I've got those things set, I can go ahead and say I'll just select all my parts and assign that and process that work order. So once I've processed my nest, I can open up my drawings. And if I look inside my nest drawings, I'll just open up my composite drawing here. And what you'll see is, rather than just random L-shaped scrap and things, now that I've got my scrap turned on, it's creating these different rectangles to fill that scrap. And so now each of these can become a scrap part. And so here you can see the labels for those parts based on the material that's used. And so here this part is not going to be saved to inventory, so anything that gets a border around it is going to be saved back to the inventory for use as a future possible sheet size. And anything that doesn't meet the size requirements is just going to fall off the table there. Or if I have offall destruction turned on, it would eliminate that material as well and turn it to dust. So now that I have my scrap generated, I can say commit scrap to inventory, and that's going to open this box in order to allow me to commit those items. So these are all the default parts that have come up as scrap, and so I'll just go ahead and take those. I'll say they're going to be in scrap bin number 1 and send those over. And so now when I go to create my next work order, it's going to look at those scrap parts that are available. And it's going to use those as the first sheets to be optimized. So now when I'm in my new work order, I have the option here to suspend scrap auto consumption. Because I turned it on in the nesting processing station, it's going to use it by default. If I wanted to stop that, I could turn that on, but I'm going to go ahead and process, and it'll just use that scrap. And so now when I look at the drawing for this work order, if I open that up, you can see there's some regular sheet sizes, and then here I've got a piece of scrap. So this is scrap NV401, and that's what's being used for this work order. And so now if I go back and commit my scrap to inventory, you can see I've got this scrap that's been used and some additional scrap that's been generated. And if I go to my optimization reports, I can see because when I committed that scrap to inventory, I assigned it to scrap bin 1. It tells me here, this is the scrap part that I'm looking for, the size of it, and here's the location where I'll find that. And so this really allows me to optimize my materials and optimize my scrap pieces as well so that I can reuse them for future use. And so it really increases efficiency on material usage and being able to reuse those offcuts for future projects.